I've just watched an old documentary from UTV, also television, called The Titanic, or Titanic Built in Belfast. Now, when I got YouTube connection with this new laptop, I knew at some point this year I wanted to make a video about the Titanic. And this is a little later than I expected, but here it is. And this is the perspective of someone from Northern Ireland, from Belfast specifically. Um, I'm a son of Belfast. I was born in Belfast. I was born on the 1st of September 1985. Now that's quite a coincidence. Any Titanic scholars will know that Neil Ballard rediscovered the Titanic on the 1st of September 1985. So I'm quite chuffed with that little fact. There can't be many other people in the world born in the city the Titanic was built on the same day, the very same day it was rediscovered. And I'm quite chuffed by that. But I have another connection with the Titanic. Thomas Andrews, the chief architect who designed the ship, I don't know if this is true or not, but he supposedly lived in a house called Ashrowan in South Belfast, which later became a bed and breakfast. That bed and breakfast was owned by my grandparents. So you could say I have something of a personal Titanic connection. I've always been fascinated by the story. I've always been interested in the ship. You may be able to hear in the background soundtrack from the film. I bought that earlier this year. In this video, there's probably not a lot I can say that has already been said about the Titanic, because it's without a shadow of a doubt the world's most famous ship. No other ship even comes close. You have maybe the Mayflower, Lusitania. Just be quiet a little minute. That's beautiful music, beautiful soundtrack. But you know, the Titanic is an odyssey. This documentary from the 1990s focuses more on the architects who built the ship in Belfast, as opposed to sort of the passengers, and we all know about its sinking. This documentary isn't so much about that. This is about the actual building process, which isn't so well documented. So if you manage to find that somewhere, it's called Titanic Built in Belfast, or Made in Belfast. It's worth watching. You know, they say the Titanic, its fate, represented the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. This year, of course, is the 100th anniversary. I bought this earlier in the year. Commemorative coin. So they say it symbolised the fall of empire. It symbolised the impending disaster that was to come in the form of World War One. And they say that when people in East Belfast heard about the Titanic sinking, that had the same sort of shock in East Belfast as when they heard about the first day of the Battle of the Somme, in which the 36th Ulster Division was absolutely slaughtered. So it really had a deep, deep impact culturally on the city. This ship's famous the world over, and I am proud that I was born in the city that made this legend. I mean, it was folly in many ways, and there's a lot of things to say about the Titanic. The absolute absurdity of safety. People often talk about the women and children first issue. My argument would be no one had to die on that ship. In fact, the Titanic, the ironic thing was the Titanic was actually not breaking any laws of the time. They actually had enough lifeboats in terms of the regulation, slightly more. But by today's standards, that was manslaughter. You sent away lifeboats half full. You know, many men died who didn't need to die. Many women died who didn't need to die. Many people died who did not need to die that night. And you had absurd situations whereby But anyway, I don't want to go into that because I feel that's distracting. I might make that in another video. This is more just about the centenary of this famous ship. Recently there was a postcard auctioned off. It was an original photograph, believed to be of the very iceberg that sank the ship, taken a few days before on another ship. That's fascinating. It's quite incredible, you know. As for the film, there were some inaccuracies. I mean, they portrayed Murdoch, Second Officer Murdoch, in a very bad light. He didn't kill himself. That was quite a slur against him and his family. That was wrong. But generally, I do believe it was the greatest film ever made, about the greatest ship ever made. Recently, I was in Rotterdam, famous maritime city, world's third busiest port, and there I saw the SS Rotterdam. It's 38,000 tons, slightly smaller than the Titanic. That's the nearest I've got to a ship that's like the Titanic. That thing was huge, and it was quite impressive. And that put into scale what the Titanic must have been like. I'm just going to swivel this around. You may be able to see up there, poster of the Titanic. I've got a Titanic coin. I'm drinking from a Titanic mug, playing Titanic music. I've got the film. I'm very into the Titanic. I think if you're from Belfast, it's hard not to be. Some say it's become a cliche, but you know, maybe it has. Some people say the ship should be laid to rest after 100 years and we should stop dwelling on it, and I can see where that's coming from. Some people sort of saw the recent commemoration as a bit mawkish when people were dressing up in Edwardian costume and so on. I'm not so sure that it was, provided people were respectful at that moment of commemoration. I don't think there's really anything wrong with commemorating the culture of the time. It was disgraceful so many people died when they really didn't have to. And that was down to just pure negligence on the part of White Star Line. I will say something about Bruce Ismay. He's been somewhat vilified by history. I think that's somewhat wrong. It's not a case that he pushed past women and children and jumped on a lifeboat. What happened was he waited until women and children in the area had got on lifeboats in that particular part of the ship, and crew offered positions to men there, and he took it. Now, you might argue that was unprofessional for someone of his status, but ultimately I think it's wrong to vilify a man for the sole reason of living. Now, it's true there was real social issues of the time, but I think it's wrong that anyone was vilified because no one had to die. And you know, the chivalrous code, I'll make another video about that, but I believe thoroughly no one had to die in that ship. And so all I really want to say is just that I'm fascinated by the ship. I felt it's appropriate to make this on the 100th anniversary. I went to see the film Titanic 3D earlier this year with some friends, Chinese friends. There's an interest over there. You know, I think this legend will endure. There's no survivors left now. The last survivor, Melvina Dean, I think she died 2 years ago. So it is beyond living memory now. But culturally, it's integral to the history of Belfast and the United Kingdom. And that's it. Okay.